Okay, so right away, praise the Lord. Goodness. All right, there you go. So right away, we're going to talk about Israel. I promised you in my last video that that would be our focus for the next few videos. I think next 10, but realistically, I think it's going to be 9 more, including this one. And we're going to talk about Israel from the standpoint of earliest in their history. I think sometimes it's easy to just look at Israel today, or look at Israel in the time of David, or look at Israel in the time of Jesus, and just kind of take a screenshot of them and say, this is who they are, this is what they're about. And that's okay as a reference, but it's not really the biblical way. By biblical, I mean by chronologically, the lifespan of the country, the lifespan of the people, I think goes far deeper. And it's a quite beautiful story, because in many ways, Israel is a microcosm of all the nations in a larger sense. I mean, they're human, so they're going to be sinful. they're imperfect, but God still calls them into trying to have a relationship with them. And they're a conduit, like I said in the last video, to attract, to be a light unto the nations. And before I get too deep into this, I will be so I'm going to kind of set this up a little different. I don't really have any high-tech stuff to, put scriptures when I'm talking. So I will definitely give you a detailed, I'll try to do it based on reference, but I'll give you a detailed list of the verses and the chapters that I talk about today. Today, I'm going to focus in on Numbers 22 to 24. Those who are Bible thumpers would know that this is the story of Balaam. Who is Balaam? So Balaam is this guy who appears in the Bible initially as a prophet, initially as a good guy, but he's not an Israelite. So he's a prophet. He has a direct line with God. God actually talks to him, but then he is remembered later on in the New Testament as a wizard, as someone who worked in the occult. And it's very interesting. That dynamic is very interesting because of how it relates to Israel. So, and also what God thinks of Israel. So let me just give you I'm going to give you the storyline, okay? And then you who know the Bible will be able to correct me. It's a free country. You who know the Bible will be able to correct me, but I think I did enough study on this to where I think I'll get it right. And if you have any questions, hey, feel no shame, okay? Feel no shame. If you haven't read the story in the Bible, it's okay. It's okay. Feel free to, shoot your questions. It's totally fine. I'm still trying to sort this out, and I actually love digging into this. So, let's start. So, the story of Balaam in Israel. So, Israel had gotten out of Egypt. God opened the Red Sea. I think we all know that. God opened the Red Sea, and Israel crossed the desert, across the Red Sea into the desert. And then by the time Israel gets to Mount Sinai is this beautiful place where God gives the law, what you would hear some Jews call the Torah, or all Jews will call the Torah, sorry. And this law is the perfect, I like to think about it as the perfect mindset of God, because it just tells you what God thinks about everything and in its fine-tuned way. Why do I say like that? Because yes, the law is a list of instructions. It's a list of things you have to do, but it's more importantly, it's what God thinks is best, what God projects, what God has ordained as best. And so when you have the law of God, it allows you to enter this covenant. When I was dating my wife, you got to ask her, like, hey, so what's your favorite food? What's your preference for this or that? Like that is the law. It's in many ways is the template for you to enter a relationship with God. It lets you know, how does God feel about adultery? How does God feel about robbery? How does God feel about how you should do agriculture? How does God feel about how your clothes should look? How does God feel about how you should rest? How does God feel about X, Y, and Z? So God gives this law to Israel. And so I think we all know the story. I was going to say Abraham. Oh my goodness. Moses stays up in the mountain, Mount Sinai, for 40 days, 40 nights. And the people at the bottom of the mountain get very nervous. They're like, where's this guy who just took us out of Egypt? We're going to all die here. We haven't seen him in 40 days. Like, imagine if you hadn't seen, like, let's say your father for 40 days. Like, or your mom or your sister or like your brother. Like, you would be like, what is going on here? So Israel backslides. And they kind of had an idea that God, Yahweh, or Jehovah was the only God, but it hadn't been presented to them. And so so Israel decides to make a golden calf. Aaron, which is the brother of Moses, makes his golden calf for them. And then God says to Moses, hey, servant, look at what the people are doing. They already backslid. They are in big trouble because I took them out of Egypt, and now they're telling the world that this golden calf is the one who actually did it for them. Big no-no. And so at this moment, Moses recognizes, and this is important, Moses recognizes that God's law has been broken in the most serious way. You shouldn't have other gods before God. And so what does Moses do? He breaks the law. But as he breaks the tablets of the law, to give the people a chance, because they had not been presented with the law of God officially, God still ordains punishment. And so Israel enters this weird time in their history where they eventually are in the desert 40 years because of a constant rebellion. Rebellion, by the way, guys, it just means doing the opposite of what God wants you to do. It doesn't. Samuel tells us that rebellion is similar to witchcraft, because it's just, you just do what you want because you know you can, and so you want to stay in your ways, and that's what rebellion is. And so when there's rebellion, there's punishment. And so Israel enters this chapter in their early history of conflict against God, of just going opposite of God. God tells them, go out and scope the land. They do. And then 12 princes come back from the 12 tribes, and 10 say, hey, the land is beautiful, but there's no way we're going to actually be able to take over. Only 2 out of the 12 princes of Israel actually believe God and say, hey, we can take this land because God promised it to us. And there are giants in the land, and there are people in the land that are more aggressive, more war ready, more resource ready than us, but we can take them on because God has given us his word, and we'll be able to do it. But the majority of the people don't believe. And so Israel's in this weird relationship with God. And the only reason why God does not destroy Israel then is because Moses says, Lord, if please don't destroy Israel. Moses gets in between. God tells Moses, hey, look, I'm going to destroy all of them because I'm tired. He uses the expression, they're stiff-necked. They're just rebellious. They do what they want. They don't want to listen to me. And Moses says, Lord, and this is what ministry calls for. Moses says, Lord, don't do that, because then the nations will say that you brought them out to the desert just to kill them. And Moses intercedes. Moses steps in. And he says, and then moreover, Moses says, hey, Lord, if you're not going to go with us, don't put my name in your book. Meaning, if we're going to die in the desert, we're all gonna. If we're gonna be taken off your book, then I want you to start with me. And it's a beautiful story of solidarity. But that's the only reason why God doesn't absolutely, at that moment when the golden calf is made and God is ready to destroy Israel, that is the only reason why God doesn't destroy Israel at that point. Now, later in Amos, one of the prophets towards the end of the Old Testament, we find out that this entire time, the 40 years that Israel's in the desert, they're also carrying along with their idols. So it's not like it was a one-off. they were also carrying other idols. And so Israel's caught in this weird pattern of just rebellion, idolatry, but they're also surrounded by the miraculous. Every day there's manna. Except on Shabbos. Every day there's the miraculous happening around them. Every day God's showing their providence. Every day there's a pillar, either a fire by night or a cloud by day, to show them that God is still with them, that God is still making a way for them. So I want people who don't go to church to really take this in, because this is consistent with Israel's history. This is consistent with Israel's history. You're going to see moments where there's a group of Israelites who are going to do what they want, who are going to be rebellious to God, who God is still going to punish. But then you're going to see God's promises on the other end. Sorry, I just got out of a medical procedure today. But then you're going to see a group of Israelites who God is going to shine his face upon them as he promised them. And he will make them the head and not the tail. And he will honor them because they honored him. And this is really the story this is God's promise for all people. It starts with Israel, and God proves it with Israel. But, if you're a Christian and you want to honor God and you do things right and you put the Lord first and you serve God honorably and with your whole heart, with your whole mind, you will be the head and not the tail. But if you think you're just because you're a Christian, you're a legacy Christian, you're a good person, but you rob, you cheat on your wife, you do what you want, you're going to enter into judgment. God is going to God reserves the right to defend his word. And no amount of religiosity is going to get in the way of God judging those in his own house. Ezekiel tells us that the judgment of the Lord begins by his own house. It starts at his house. And then once God judges those in his house, then he can judge the nations. Powerful. So Balaam, I'm going to make it very quick because I think I already explained the bulk of the problem here that we're seeing with Israel. And this is going to help create the context we need for our next videos. When you have Balaam is this guy who has a direct line with God. He talks to God. He calls out to God and God responds to him. But Balaam gets a call from an Ammonite king. So Israel, at this point in their journey, they're about to cross into the promised land. They're about to, go into war with Ammon and Moab. And I want to say it's the king of Ammon. Actually, Balak. He reaches out to Balaam. He knows that Balaam is a seer and that God actually talks to him. And he said, Balaam, I need you to curse these people being the Israelites, because the Israelites were camped all around the Moabite and the Ammonite kingdom. And so they were hard to miss. And they had felt the fear of knowing the Israel story. The Israel story is that God is going to, if God told you he's going to deliver you from Pharaoh, he's not just only going to deliver you from Pharaoh. He's going to open the Red Sea for you, and he's going to feed you the way through, even though you're rebellious and you do things how you shouldn't. But God is going to be faithful. And if you're on the opposite end of that, you're going to feel the brunt of God's judgment. And so Balak, the king of the Moabites and Ammonites, he knew this was bad for business. So he calls this seer, and this seer or this prophet, he starts off good, and he asks God, can I go curse the Israelites? And God tells him up front, no, you can't. You can't because they're blessed. And Balak comes and says, come on, I'll give you all this money, all this good stuff. And Balaam asked God again, and he said, look, you can go, but you can only say what I tell you to say. Now, I'm going to skip over the best part of this story is when Balaam's donkey actually talks. I'm going to skip over that because I don't want to distract us from, you guys are going to get distracted. All my ADHDers, you're definitely going to get distracted. Pause this and go read about Balaam's donkey talking to him. But what happens? So Balaam tries 3 times from 3 different positions to curse the Israelites. And every time Balaam opens his mouth in front of Balak with a sacrifice ready before God, every time Balaam opens his mouth to curse Israel, God gives a lesson to him. And so I wrote it down because I told you I'm not high tech, but I think it's it's worthwhile to look at. And I kind of wrote it down as kind of just touch points. But the first lesson in the first vision, God tells Balaam, Israel's a people set apart. I know there's a lot of debate about what does it mean that Israel's, the chosen people. Are they the chosen people? Yes, they are. But it starts with being set apart. And what does being set apart mean? Being set apart means that you're holy. Kadosh means that you're set apart. You're anything that's holy is set apart. You can't mix it up with the rest. Now, isn't this weird? Like, didn't we just spoke 14 minutes about discussing on how Israel was being so stubborn, carrying their idols still, even after God's fury over the golden calf, doing what they want. I mean, just stubborn in sin. But God understood it's not all of them, 1. And 2, I have a purpose for them. They've been set apart. And Balaam, this should have been the only lesson that Balaam needed. But Balaam, under pressure, asked again. And again, on this first vision, God says they're set apart and they're blessed. Israel's blessed and cannot be cursed. Keep that in mind. Israel's blessed and cannot be cursed. This is what God is saying about Israel in their lowest point. Okay? Israel cannot be cursed. All right? Just internalize that for me. In the second vision, Balaam goes again, tries to get God to change his judgment on Israel. And God says, I'm not like you humans. I do not lie and I don't change my mind. Basically stating, hey, Balaam, if you expected me to change from Israel set apart and Israel cannot be cursed, I'm not going to do it. I am not like you, Balaam. I am not like you, Balak. I am not like you, X, Y, and Z, who, one moment you feel one way. I'm not a congressman who one moment I'm telling you something and 5 minutes later I've changed my mind about it. God is not that. If he says something, it's going to be. And so, again, and in the second vision, he not only says that God doesn't change his mind or God does not lie, he's also saying Israel's strong and protected. That's the takeaway from the second vision. Now, Balaam, being Balaam, tries to do this again. He does this again. And he does a third sacrifice for Balak. And then God gives his ultimatum on Israel. He says Israel's prosperous and victorious, and their future is secure. Now, those are the sum of what God was saying. You can read. I'll put the scriptures for you to read. It's a pretty lengthy story. It takes 2 full chapters, but I wanted to give you this story in the context of where Israel was. Israel was deserving of God's judgment. It should have been for God to just say, you know what, Balaam, these people have been up. They have me up to here with their problems, their arrogance, if we really break down the 40 years that Israel was in the desert, they really deserve a good whooping. But God is faithful and God is merciful. And if God called you for something, he's not going to, at your low point, abandon you. That's what you need to know about the God of Israel. He's not going to abandon you at your low point. You need to internalize that, because there's an entire movement of the devil today telling you that God is going to abandon you at your low point. And God is not known. He has never done that. He's not a human to do that. And so, again, I say this because this is Israel at its low point. And this is what God says about Israel. Most importantly, God says, hey, a star will rise from Jacob. Jacob was the name of Israel before God changed it. Okay? A star will come from there. And from that star, I will raise a king, a Messiah, to lead the nations. Now, not only is God not defining Israel because of its past, not only is God saying, hey, these are mediocre people, I'm just going to keep them mediocre at a mediocre level. He's saying, actually, I got kingship, I got purpose, I got vision for these people. They're set apart. I'm not going to change my mind about them. I know, and this is why this had to be the first video, because I know that there's a lot of talk about Israel today, but just remember that God at Israel's lowest moment didn't change his mind about them. He's not going to start now when Israel's been around for 3,000 something years. Okay. And I know what some people are saying. Well, they were promised that land 3,000 years ago. Well, you know what? We wait on him, not the other way around. Okay. And by the way, Moses said, for God, one day is like 1,000 years is like one day. So, so this is the God we serve. And I'm finishing up now. I definitely took 22 minutes. Goodness. But I want to lay this story. I think the other videos are going to be shorter. I want to lay this story because I want people to understand the trajectory of where things are going. Israel's going up. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going up. That doesn't mean they're going up, without challenges, or that God's still not going to finish the work he's doing in them. Absolutely. And God shows it in the trajectory of Israel in the desert. There's no blank check. There's no, oh, well, you're my chosen people, so you get to do what you want. It just doesn't work that way with God. If you're chosen, you're meant to be set apart and holy, and you got to act like it. You got to live it. And that's hard. As a Christian, I'm telling you, someone who backslid, okay? I'm not here to try to enforce God's rules necessarily, because I'm not sitting on the judgment seat. I'm the last one. Matter of fact, even as the last one, I don't think I have any right to even imagine myself in that situation. I'm here to talk to you about how God views his word over time. And so, what are the takeaways? God does not change his mind. If he chose you and he gave you a purpose for future, he's going to carry it out. And lastly, and this is unique about Israel, the Messiah, the leader, the king of all nations will come from there. So, all right, I think this is all that time permits for today, but I'm probably going to take about 3 weeks to post the next few videos. If you'd like, you can subscribe or just like the video so the algorithm remembers to notify you when I publish something, or click the bell. I think I'm not really into the YouTube stuff. I don't really feel like a YouTuber, so y'all do what y'all want. But if y'all want to stay in touch, please write questions. Please stay engaged. And please start submitting topics that you'd like to discuss about the Bible. We're going to go in depth, more into scripture, obviously during the Bible, the Israel series, but towards the latter part of the series, we're also going to talk about other parts in the Bible involving other nations around Israel. And I think that's important too, because it just lets you see how God views the nations. And so, thank you guys for joining. God bless.